In the 2020 election, January 6th, all figure into the next election. Ahead of the 2024 presidential campaign, a number of social media platforms are starting to roll back some of the measures they put in place to combat misinformation. Last week, YouTube announced it will stop removing content that falsely claims the 2020 election was fraudulent. In a blog post, the company wrote, removing such posts could, quote, have the unintended effect of curtailing political speech without meaningfully reducing the risk of violence or other real-world harm. Facebook's parent company, Meta, also recently reinstated the Instagram account of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He was removed from the platform in 2021 for posting misinformation on COVID vaccines. Meta says it is bringing his personal account back because he is now an active candidate for president. Joining us now to talk about this, NBC News senior reporter Ben Collins and professor of psychology and behavioral economics at Duke University, Dan Ariely. He's author of the forthcoming book titled Misbelief: What Makes Rational People Believe Irrational Things. Good morning to you both. It's good to have you here. Ben, let me start with you on the YouTube, sort of the most recent of these companies, starting to roll back and saying it's about political speech. We've got to let people say what they want. There isn't a real threat of violence from these things. January 6th seems like a case against that point. Why are they doing it?
Because apparently none of us were alive for the last 7 years. I don't know. The real answer here, guys, is political gamesmanship here. Over the last 2 years, the #1 priority for the Republican Congress is to bring up the Twitter files and all these things about speech on the internet. But you know what happened, really? We have less speech. It costs $8 to post something on Twitter that gets seen now, right? And I'm just saying, I know that sounds very facile. I get it. But also, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, they all had these things. They had these back-end things that people like you could go and look at. There's this thing called CrowdTangle that used to exist on Facebook. You could see basically what was going on in that platform, right? This is because of years of academics saying we need to find out what's going on in these black boxes that are social media networks. Twitter are the same thing. It's basically called API access. You can go, the best analog for this, you can go to the pharmacy, you can ask what's behind the pharmacy, you can get the thing out of the pharmacy. You can see basically what information you want to get. That's gone. And that's from years of lobbying from Republicans to specifically try to get as much unfettered speech as possible. That sort of thing was labeled as, the disinformation regime. The people trying to stop you from saying free speech. Just the study of the actual speech on the internet. And now we have, the same Republicans are saying things like TikTok are a national security threat. Guess what? We're never going to know what's behind that black box because the pressure that academics put on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, Google, Instagram, that pressure is now politically not fine. What we have is, it's speech inflation, basically. All of the good information out there costs money. It costs money to say stuff on the internet. It costs money to get good information on the internet. Now that API, you can still access the Twitter API, but it's exorbitantly expensive, millions of dollars sometimes. So that's the issue here. It's like we have evolved past this point on the internet where you can get good information or you can even speak your mind.
So, Dan, obviously Twitter has changed since Elon Musk took over. Yeah. Ben just laid out many of the ways that it has changed. Conservatives say it has changed for the better. They have a platform, they have a place to speak their mind. What about YouTube, though, and some of these other companies, Meta, who are saying, no, we're going to kind of go back a little bit in some ways to the way it was?
Yeah, so first of all, I think that the whole definition of this as misinformation is wrong. And it's not that there's no misinformation, but the real problem is corrosive information. When we think about misinformation, we say, oh, if there was just another fact on the other side, everything would be fine. It's misinformation, let's just fix it. What people don't understand, and I had the misfortune of being very much attacked by COVID deniers for the last 2 years, I've been spending a ton of time in the dens of misinformation. They had one video that described how, because I was badly injured, as you can see, I started hating healthy people, and that's why I joined Bill Gates and the Illuminati, trying to kill as many people as possible. That's just fake news, because what happens is that people go down a funnel and they change. It's corrosive news, right? Fake news saying we can fix it. Corrosive news say we can't fix it. At some point when people start creating different beliefs about the nature of the world, our trust in our government, our trust in our health system, very hard to go back. And one of the things that, like, the journey is really interesting. It has lots of elements. There's stress, there's personality, there's cognitive. But the social element is basically the thing that seals the deal. And you know, if you think about COVID as an example, people were, you know, society turned away to people who had a certain belief, and they found a whole new community that showed them tremendous love and caring and so on. There's no way back. There's no way back. Once you found a community, once you spend a lot of effort, once you develop those beliefs, there's no way back. So when we say misinformation, yes, there's misinformation out there. We used to think that, you know, fat is very unhealthy. Now we think there's some redeeming features in fat. Like, that's misinformation, right? We were wrong at some point. We're talking about something very different here. We're talking about taking a group of people and putting them into a funnel that if we are not careful, there's no going to go back. Now, imagine that we have another national emergency that we need to deal with. Eventually, trust in each other, trust in our government is what's going to allow us to galvanize and move forward. These are things that are corroding that. So if you look at what happened with Fox News and the election, they admitted to pay money because it was clear there was a financial outcome. Here, the outcomes are very large and very financial. They're just not to a company, they're for society as a whole. Think about what happened to people's trust in the government. We can quantify it, and we can say that as people lose trust in the FDA, in the government, and so on, there's a cost to everybody. So it's not just misinformation. It's a very, very corrosive, very deep information. And just to think about one example, think about what is called moral outrage. A lot of this information is not just to say that this person is wrong. They're saying this person is so corrupt that we could never forgive them. Right? Think about the use of pedophilia. Think about the use of traitors. This is basically saying we're moving into a very dangerous direction.
Joe?
Yeah, really dangerous. There's so many things to bounce off of from what Dan just said. I'll just say, Ben, part of it that I've seen is the community aspect that he talked about. You have people who are isolated in their homes. You have people who have failed. And I'm not generalizing everybody. I'm not generalizing everybody, but I do want you to talk about this. So many people that I come in touch with that have these conspiracy theories, they've lost their jobs. They're isolated from their families. They're broken. Life has broken them. They are, you know, it's what we've talked about on this show in rural America. You know, Tim Carney wrote a great book talking about how evangelical churches have shut down. There's not that community. I always talked about on Sunday, you know, we'd go into Sunday school and everybody'd be sitting around, you know, drinking their coffee and would all be talking. Then suddenly somebody would come up with a crazy conspiracy theory and would just kind of turn and go, where did you hear that? That ain't right. But anyway, how about the Falcons? They're going to win this week, right? And then we go back to talking. That's not there now. Like, you've got a lot of these churches, as Tim said, have been hollowed out. There's no community. There's no sounding boards. They just sit. And as Dan said, and as you say all the time, they get funneled down into this community of hatred, of conspiracy theories, of lies, and they're welcomed in it.
Yeah, it's a 30-year project. There's a book, by the way, called Bowling Alone that's all about this, literally about bowling alone, right? About the idea that once you lose that sort of community, it needs to be replaced somehow. And the issue is there's one political party that's very okay and open to the concept of leading people down this path and saying, you know, everything that you think is true about all these conspiracy theories, instead of, you know, slightly correcting them and talking about football, which is what we used to do, we still kind of do, right? On the internet, that's not how it works. You just get funneled down deeper. For example, you know, if you were to listen to Ron DeSantis's launch with Elon Musk on Twitter, which a lot of you couldn't, but if you could find a way to get on there, you would hear nothing but just like weird acronyms: ESG, DEI, CBDCs. Do you even know what the CBDC is?
That one I don't know.
All right.
Got you on the other two.
Exactly. So that's a digital currency thing that they think is going to be like a rival to Bitcoin. But it's all a different language because they have funneled themselves into this really specific space where they just say everyone's out to get you. All these acronyms are out to get you. And they're all placeholders for different things. DEI does not mean DEI. It means black and gay people. Frankly, that's what it means. It's a fear of the other. And you get more fear of the other as you go down these holes. And that's exactly what Dan is talking about, is once you create a political identity out of this, that some big anonymous entity at the top is trying to get you, trying to reel you in. And instead of talking about football, instead of talking about stuff that actually exists and real stuff, instead of talking about real issues, you know, the fact that like Cheerios cost $9 or something, that's going to be a problem because you can't bring them back from that. You can't bring them back to talking about Cheerios at $9 if you're talking about how there's one big entity trying to rule the world.
Now,
Can I add
yeah,
something
please
on
go
this?
ahead.
No, it's very easy to dismiss conspiracies or misbeliefs, but they actually answer a very deep psychological need. And the question is, what is the psychological need? And it's basically a remedy for stress. So if you think that the world is unfair to you and things are going in all kinds of strange way and I don't understand what is going on, I am looking for something to blame.
Yeah.
What do I find to blame? Here is this particular entity, particular acronym to blame. And if you look at those mechanisms, they do both. They create a stress, right? There's entity here after you. They create a stress. They increase the chance that somebody would look for another non-standard explanation, right? I mean, the reality is that stuff happens, lots of mistakes happen, lots of things, but the moment you create stress, you basically drive people into looking for something that is a causal mechanism of an evil entity that would do it. And then, of course, you serve them those entities. So it's a perfect solution to misdirect people.
It's storytelling, right?
Yeah.